Okay, well, in the interest of timekeeping, we'll go ahead and get started. Good morning again, everyone. And on behalf of the Spanish Chamber of Commerce in the UK, I'd like to give you a very warm welcome to this webinar that we're holding on the topic of business opportunities in Spain and the Canary Islands. We're really pleased to be holding our last event of the year with Chamber Benefactor EBF Consulting, which is a bilingual office with more than 20 years of experience that offers tax management, accounting and employment and legal services for businesses throughout Spain. And they are an expert in non-resident taxes and tax incentives for business startups in the Canary Islands. Our speaker for today's session is Natasha Mia-Leyland. Natasha is a tax advisor and lawyer, director and founder of EBF Consulting. She's an acting board member of the Association for Tax Consultants in Spain and a long-standing member of the British Chamber of Commerce in Spain. She's also a business ambassador for Proexca, an expert on the tax incentives in the Canary Islands. To kickstart today's session, we do have a very quick introductory video that I'll go ahead and play now. And then following that, I'll hand over to Natasha.
EBF Consulting is a consultancy with offices in Madrid and Canary Islands in Spain. An independent professional firm with a friendly personal approach. As specialists in international legal and tax matters, we collaborate with the world's leading firms. Our firm has extensive experience with taxation in the Canary Islands Special Economic Zone. Our team of legal and tax professionals will handle all your concerns. EBF Consulting provide professional solutions.
Great, so I will hand over to you now, Natasha. I know you need to share your screen.
That's great. Okay, well, thank you very much, Rebecca, and also to the Spanish Chamber for organising the event today. I hope that the information that's going to be provided is going to be ample enough to encourage those people that are here today to perhaps expand into Spain, and that the information is going to be as useful as possible. That's the idea anyway. So why would we be looking at Spain as such? Obviously, we're all here as part of the Spanish Chamber, so we all know what we want there. But I wanted to just mention that the British investment in Spain has reached, within the last 4 quarters, €5.5 billion, and the volume of the foreign direct investment flows from the UK ranks second, above France and Germany. All of this was mentioned in the recent barometer from the British Chamber of Commerce in Spain. So it's interesting to see that even though we've gone through the pandemic, the Brexit referendum, and of course the Ukrainian-Russian war that's taken place, the foreign investment has still continued to increase, which is really obviously positive for us to mention, I think, in the seminar today. There seems to be quite a lot of negativity with regards to the concerns that we've got with the increase in inflation and perhaps some of the situations with the political aspects that have been involved. But I think it's really important at the beginning of this webinar to mention those positive aspects for anybody that it might be a little bit more apprehensive now of making that decision on expanding the business. So what I want to, there are several areas that I would like to discuss with, present to you today really is the 3 specific areas in Spain that I think are going to be of main interest for anybody that's wanting to look at expanding into Europe and using Spain as one of the gateways. We've got the Madrid, which has a program, Invest in Madrid program. There's also Valencia for those high-tech and innovation activities, and we've also got the Canary Islands hub. And then after that, I'll be looking at some business structures and some tax incentives that you would need to be taken into consideration if you decided to make that step. So, as I mentioned before, Spain being one of the most popular countries to maintain presence in Europe or access that presence in Europe, there's good flexibility and adaptability of economic operators. There's a very close cultural proximity to the Latin American countries. As I mentioned before, the geographical location of Spain makes it a great gateway to the European Union, also North African countries, Middle Eastern and Latin American markets. We've got a good developed infrastructure network. There's a diversified economy that welcomes big international companies. Obviously, there's a big, important tourism sector not to be forgotten about. And I think with the change, there seems to be quite speaking with other professional companies and clients in different industries and from different countries, there seems to be quite a jump now, and especially after the pandemic, with regards to what people are considering important in their working life. And I think especially the younger generation that are coming into the working environment now are looking at the quality of life, looking at perhaps where they would like to locate themselves with regards to bringing their families into their life and moving forward with their career, but having good balance now with their working lifestyle. So the first part of Spain that I'm going to look at here with you is the Madrid, if you were looking at relocating into Madrid, what does Madrid offer you as a business if you were looking at entering into Spain? Well, it has the second European airport, largest European airport for capacity. There's direct access to 200 destinations in 74 countries. There's 25% of the direct flights from Europe and Latin America. And it's got a fantastic accessibility to the center of Madrid. It's only 12 kilometers from the center. And there's a train network that connects you direct from the airport to the city centre. Talent is also important to mention. I'll be mentioning this throughout the three destinations that we're going to be looking at today. Obviously, if you're a company that's wanting to relocate or expand, then the talent within those areas is going to be something of extreme importance to you. So I think these are issues that could be of interest. In Madrid, 50% of the population have university qualifications. There are 18 universities, 6 are public and 12 are private. There's several prestigious business schools within the area as well. And the labour costs, when we're talking about labour costs here, specifically mentioning salaries, are about 20% less than other European countries. The main sectors that Madrid has seen over the last few years are concentrated on bank, insurance and fintech, Arma and biotech. You've got the TIC and telecom, movement and sustainability, aerospace, contents and video games, logistics. It's been very, very, very popular, and also design and graphical art. These are the companies that have chosen to, they're Latin American companies, and they've chosen to operate in Europe from Madrid. So they're using Madrid as their gateway to operate in Madrid. And then we also have a list here of those foreign companies that have decided to locate in Madrid and manage their business in Latin America from Madrid. Okay, so there's some important presence there from the Latin American companies, as you can see. Just prior to the pandemic, it's the plaza, it's called Plaza Jacinto Benavente, which is about a 7-minute walk from Puerta Sol. There's a building that has been completely renovated, and this has been done purposely to encourage those companies that are considering perhaps even testing the market in Spain. So you would have the opportunity there, as long as you have been trading for more than 3 years, you would have the opportunity to use this this building, where you would be able to take advantage of their co-working space for up to 2 members of your team. And you have a meeting room there that you would be able to use either to give a presentation, because it's for, you can use that room, it's up to 20 people. So you'd be able to present your company to any possible clients or even suppliers. You've got free Wi-Fi. They also provide you with assistance regarding networking, perhaps financial backing, and looking for local talent. It's been quite popular, and depending, I think at the moment there might be some space. Sometimes there's a waiting list, so you can also put yourself on the waiting list. But I think it's very good for any UK business that might be wanting to perhaps just test that market. You would be able to make use of this for up to 6 months. If after the 6-month period you decided that, you know, this isn't going to work for us, we're going to, you know, step out of this, then you wouldn't have incurred any costs by using these facilities for that 6-month period. What would you need to be able to perhaps put yourself forward for this? Well, obviously this isn't going to be something available for just anybody. There has to be some kind of substance in the reason why you would be using this program to access Spain. So you would need to present a business plan. That business plan we would include obviously the company description. As I said before, it has to be a company that's been trading for a minimum period of 3 years. So we would provide them with financial figures for those previous 3 years, the number of employees and countries that you are currently trading in, estimated investment and the objective, estimated local jobs to be created, and local sales forecast. Okay, so we would need to study prior to your application to join this program on and we would advise on whether we think that you would be a good candidate for that. Okay, take into consideration that when you're presenting any kind of business plan in Spain, this is going, what I'm mentioning to you now is going to apply for the other areas as well. So you're always going to be required to present the Articles of Association, Corporation Certificate, which details the current registered office of the company, when it was established, who the current directors are. And then when those documents are being presented in Spain, they would need to be translated into Spanish. And for it to be a valid document, a public valid document within Europe, it does have to carry the Hague Apostle. One of the areas that Madrid, and not just Madrid, but Spain itself, has become very popular with regards in the film industry is due to the tax incentives for those international films and television series that are going to be filmed on Spanish territory. And this has actually made the country one of the most competitive destinations in the world for the film industry. This is due to the main one here would be the tax deduction of up to 30% for film productions, with a maximum refund of 10 million. There are eligible expenses that are taken into consideration when we calculate what that tax deduction is. and those are mainly based on the technical production and provider costs that are carried out within the Spanish territory. This could be from the executive producer, producer and production assistant, costume and characterization expenses, special effects equipment, technical and telecommunications team, the list goes on. There are some costs that would not be eligible for this, that's important to point out, and they would be those that are referred to the air and maritime and road transport of the film and equipment from one place to Spain. Okay, if they're costs that have taken place within Spanish territory, then there's not going to be any argument there. But it is important to point out that there are some costs with regards to employment and legal advisory services, depreciation of assets and rent of perhaps the administration that's carried out for that company that are not located in Spain. So therefore, anything that's attached that's not directly linked to the Spanish territory and costs that have been incurred in there, they're not going to be included in the base that we use when we're calculating that tax deduction. Okay. This is also very similar with the other areas that I'm going to be mentioning when we come to the Canary Islands. Okay. The other location is Valencia. This is becoming really popular with the they're trying to establish themselves as the global home for entrepreneurs, tech and innovation. You can see that from the location, it's very well connected to Madrid via train, 1.5 hours. Also to Barcelona, which is 2.5 hours. You've also got the main commercial port there. And there's also some good international connections to Paris, London, Berlin and Moscow. Valencia is the 3rd largest city, and it has been recently published by the Forbes magazine as actually being the best place in the world to live for its quality of life and the easiness of settling in that location when from moving abroad. That was actually published a couple of weeks ago, believe it or not. Again, for those companies that are looking at relocating, talent is going to be one of the important issues to address. So we've compiled some information here for you. You've got a competitive education system, more than 15 top international schools, 2 public universities and 6 private universities. And it is also a very popular destination for the Erasmus scheme. Key industries in Valencia are currently automotive, chemical and pharmaceutical products, plastics, agri-food, information and communications technology. The support that you would get if you were looking at relocating or testing the market in Valencia is provided by the Valencian Investment Desk. Okay, and they would be able to provide you with general and specific information about the region and what you as an investor need to know in order to develop your activity in the sector that you are specialized in. They also have project management, so they'll help you through different stages of the project to make sure that it comes to its final implementation. And also there's business location advice, which would help you find land, industrial units, etc. And they also have an aftercare program to ensure that you have that support if you wanted to consider expanding your project further into that industry. They are currently being highlighted for their again, the high-tech and innovation sectors. And they currently celebrate the Valencian Digital Summit, which is the attends to 70 countries relating to arts and sciences. They've got the Ecosystem Observatory, which collects data to facilitate any startups, big data, which you need to be able to put your good strategy together when you're there. And also they have the Capital for Startups, which is an initiative to facilitate access to investment, which obviously is one of the main resources needed when looking at establishing yourself in another country. Canary Islands, we recently took part in the webinar, I think it was last month. I'm not sure if any people that are with us today were actually in that last webinar. That was with SEC and Proesca. So I'll mention that a bit further on in this presentation. Canary Islands actually has the best tax system in Europe. We've got the 4% corporate tax, which is the lowest in Europe. You have the geographical location to take into consideration. It's privileged enough to be able to access Europe, America, and Africa. It has a significant capacity for attracting and retaining talent due to the quality of life and safety in the islands. There's also opportunities for training and professional development, which has generated a significant capacity, again, for attracting and retaining that talent. Also quite easy to find multilingual professionals among the Canary Islands. We have the connectivity and infrastructure, telecommunications network, which works with around, I think it's 50 satellites to make sure that the islands are provided with that service. And there's also interconnection via the underwater with the fiber optic cable. So everything is prepared there with regards to the telecommunications. And as I mentioned before, lifestyle in general, due to the climate, perhaps that's one of the, although I don't want to deter anybody from investing in Valencia or Madrid, but of course we do have the all year round climate that happens to be the most favourable in Europe. Key industries in the Canary Islands, we have aerospace, audiovisual, chemical industry, ICT, life sciences, renewable energy. That's a massive project that's being developed throughout the Canary Islands in each island. And then obviously we have tourism and leisure. What the Canary Islands has different is the fact that as it's an autonomous community, it also has its own economic and tax system separate to the mainland. And all of this is obviously fully approved by the EU, and we apply the double taxation conventions and fiscal transparency. The different incentives that are available in the Canary Islands compared to the mainland are the investment reserve, which is the RIC. This is aimed at stimulating investment within the company and can reduce the taxable base by up to 90% of undistributed profits. You have 3 years to carry out the investment, so you could make the savings this year on your generated profits, and then determine what you want to invest that in over a period of 3 years. That actually converts into 4 years due to the fact that the corporation tax isn't presented until July of the following year. Okay, and those undistributed profits would then need to be invested in anything that a fixed asset that you would need to be able to carry out the activity, and you would need to maintain that for a period of 5 years. So that could be fixed assets. It could also be job creation and the subscription of shares. There's also tax credits of 20%, 25% of the acquisition cost, as long as it doesn't exceed 50% of the tax due. 7% of HEEC, which is value added tax. It's 21% in the mainland. We've got the 4% corporation tax for SEC entities. It's 25% for any other company. So it's 25% general rate, which is applied all over Spain, including the Canary Islands. But there is the possibility of obtaining an authorization for you to be considered a SEC entity, which would allow you to pay 4% corporation tax. And then you have the tax deduction of up to 50% for film productions with a maximum refund of 10 million. You might remember from the previous one, I think here was 30%, yeah, 30% in the other parts of Spain, okay? SEC entity requirements would be a minimum investment of 100,000 euros in Gran Canaria and Tenerife. It's 50,000 euros on the other islands. You would need to ensure that you can employ a minimum number of staff of 5 within 6 months in Gran Canaria and Tenerife. The other islands would be 3. And then there is an authorization that would need to be obtained prior to being able to carry out this activity to ensure that you are going to be able to identify the social attributes of your project. Economic and technical solvency is also something that you would need to prove. So the idea there, what we find very often is people will approach us with their business project, and when we're looking at preparing the financial part of that project, they might say, oh, well, we are going to be relying on income or profits generated in the second year to assist with the financing of the investment. That's not going to be possible. So although your financial part needs to look favorable, because you will be valued on that, you do need to make sure that you've got sufficient solvency to carry out the investment that you're promising to carry out. Okay. The different business structures that you would be looking at when operating in any of the 3 regions that I've just mentioned is, first one, most common would be the SL company, which is the same as a limited company in the UK. There we would need to apply first for the name to the mercantile registry. When we present that application, you've got 5 options. So we would always suggest to a client that they give us the 5 names, possible names that they would want to name their company, and in order of preference, and we will put them on that one application. We would also do a previous research to see whether there's any possibility that those names currently exist or there's a similarity to another company. The minimum share capital has now just been reduced in November. That was, I think it was November, it was published. It was previously 3,000 euros. Now there's a minimum share cap of €1. However, you also need to be quite sensible about that, although that's quick. If we had a client that was wanting to incorporate a company with €1, we would be presuming that as soon as they are active, they're going to be receiving sufficient turnover to cover the costs. Obviously, if you're incorporating a company with €1 and then within the first 3 months you're incurring costs, where's the money come from to pay for those costs? You would then be in a situation where you've either got to increase the share capital, or you've got to create an agreement with that company where it's a loan from the shareholders or from a third-party investor or from the administrator. We would need to make sure that, you know, the reality of incorporating a company with €1 would depend greatly on what the situation was of that company as soon as they start to carry out the activity. The shareholder's obligation will be to obtain a NIE, that's a foreign identification number, and the administrator of that company would also need to obtain a NIE. Now, the administrator of that company can be an individual or it can be a legal entity. A legal entity would also need to ensure that they have the NIE in Spain. And in order for that, as I mentioned before, I think I've got it written down here, yeah. The documents that would be required if the shareholder is a UK limited company would be, as I mentioned previously in this presentation, the certificate of registration and mercantile registry, articles of association. We, due to compliance, would request last corporation tax, possibly the last 3 years corporation tax, and identification of the shareholders and directors. The obligation to appoint a fiscal representative. This is actually in accordance with the fiscal and mercantile legislation. It's not necessary to appoint a fiscal representative if the administrator is not resident in Spain. However, in accordance with the Social Security legislation, if the company is to have employees, then there is an obligation to appoint a fiscal representative if the administrator is not resident in Spain. Okay. The other structure is the SA, which would be a public limited company. This is where the same process with applying for the name would apply. However, the minimum share capital is €60,000. This minimum capital is only required in the event of liquidation. Okay, so if the company's equity is insufficient to cover its obligations, then its partners and directors will only be severally liable for that minimum capital, which is established by law. The capital is represented by shares that qualify as negotiable securities and are freely transferable, as opposed to the SL, which is slightly different. And then there is no limit of board of directors. The SL has a limited board members of 12. There's a maximum term also of board of directors in an SA, where in the SL there's no maximum term. Bonds can be raised bonds can be issued with an SA to raise funds, an SL it can't. The tax regime would be the same as the SL, general tax rate of 25%, and all the other deductions and incentives that are applicable. The other possibility of operating in Spain would be operating as a permanent establishment. This is, I've put here because sometimes it's difficult for people to understand when you are going to be considered a permanent establishment. So a permanent establishment would be when a person or a legal entity constantly or habitually have facilities and places of work in any area in which they carry out part or all of their tasks, or otherwise when they act in these places via a representative for the company who is authorized to execute contracts on behalf of the latter. That is what we would determine as a permanent establishment. And the conditions that you would need to comply with in order to be considered a permanent establishment would be the following. You'd need to have the existence of an habitual place of business. The business owner operating in the Spanish territory would not be resident. So it would be the same legal entity that you're operating on in the UK that would would operate on Spanish territory and carry out the business activities that it's usually carrying out in the UK would then carry out here in Spain. So we would obtain an identification number for that UK business and register them for the activity that they want to carry out here. There would be separate accounts of that permanent establishment here in Spain for any of the income and costs that are being incurred due to that establishment in Spain. And then you would present your consolidated accounts in the UK, where you would offset any tax that has been paid for that permanent establishment in Spain as a credit in the UK tax return to avoid double taxation. The other possibility, if you didn't want to establish a SL or an SA, which would be independent to UK company, the other possibility would be a branch office. This is defined as a secondary establishment or accessory to the main one, but with own representation and management autonomy. Economic and legal aspects would be subordinated to the main establishment. Okay, so the conditions there that would need to be met to be considered a branch office would be the fact that you have the existence of a habitual place of business. You maintain your residence in the UK, and it performs professional business activities, and you have its own autonomy. Exactly. The filial would be considered a subsidiary, and that is where it's an independent company of a parent company with its own legal personality. Okay, so the independent company would be responsible for their own creditors, although there is a shareholder relationship with the parent company who has control over it. Okay, so let me just have a look here. Well, I wanted to just highlight the difference really between the filial and the branch. Okay, so the filial is formed as an independent company of the parent company, as we've mentioned before. The subsidiary would be a company that can be formed under any of the other legal forms that we mentioned before, which would be SL or the SA. They would have their own independence and their own capital, bylaws and bodies, but they would be subject to the control of the shareholder company. Okay. Tax status for those structures that we've just gone through there. The permanent establishment and the branch would remain the UK tax resident, subject to non-resident income tax in Spain, which is 25%. The filial or the subsidiary would be classified as a tax resident in Spain and will pay the 25%. And both of those would permit the employment of staff. So you would be able to employ staff as a permanent establishment branch, equally as the filial. The 25% would change to 4% if you were going to be a SEC entity. There are other tax credits that you would need to take on board as well when you're thinking of relocating in Spain, which is important to mention here. On the right-hand side of this slide, you'll see that there's a comparison there between Canary Islands and state. So generally, you have a tax credit of 25% for those expenses that are incurred from research and development activities. This can be increased to 42% of the excess amount if the costs are higher than the previous 2 years. You have 70% tax credit for staff expenses, which are exclusively contracted for R&D. You've got 12% for technological innovation activities. There's also €9,000 for each disabled employee that you have on your staff payroll, so long as they have a minimum disability of 33%. And then we also have the capitalisation reserve, which would be 10% of the increase of equity that's incurred in the accounts that year, so long as you can maintain that increase for that year during a period of 5 years. The application of those tax credits, because you may not have had generated a profit within that tax year that you're entitled to generate the tax credit. So you would be able to maintain that tax credit for a limited number of 15 years and then apply that tax credit to the first year and the subsequent years that you generate that profit. If it's a technological company that a technological company or technological activity that's being carried out, then that increase is from 15 years to 18 years. Regards to employing staff in Spain, when you are considering employing an EU citizen, then you need to make sure that they've got their NIE. If you're looking at bringing over UK citizens, then you would need to ensure that they have their residence card. They're not permitted to work, and since the obviously Brexit, they're not permitted to work in Spain without their corresponding TA, which is their residence card. And we generally, although I'm not the expert in EBF for immigration, we do recommend that this is applied for before entering Spain. The social security costs for staff amount to 38% of their gross salary. 31.6% is company cost, and then there's a 6.4%, which would be the employee contribution. And that's based on a maximum salary of up to €36,000. Sometimes companies are put, that's one of the points I think sometimes that people would look at, oh, the social security costs are high, but they need to take into consideration that the salary expectations, due to the cost of living being lower in Spain, are also generally lower. So when you're looking at my advice there would be to look at the whole economic aspect of that, rather than just taking the 38% of gross salary into consideration. That brings us to a final there, basically, with regards to the presentation today. I don't know if there are any questions or any suggestions for a subsequent presentation. The idea that we have in collaboration with the Spanish Chamber of Commerce is to ensure that there's information that's being supplied to other members or people that are interested in carrying out business in Spain. So it'd be really good if we could have some feedback on what information has been shared with you today, because if there's any particular area that we've discussed that you'd like us to go into more detail, we do collaborate with ProESCA. ProESCA is and SEC. They're both two governing organisations that are promoting and assisting investment in the Canary Islands. We also collaborate with the Invest in Madrid programme. So if you would like or are interested in us giving more information on a particular area and you would like us to do that with the Spanish Chamber, then please contact us or contact us personally. And if there are any questions that you would like to have put forward now, then you can let us know.
We do have some questions in the Q&A, Natasha, to get us started. But in the meantime, if any of you do have any further questions, there's the Q&A function below and also the chat function. So as Natasha mentioned, whether that's for a question or for some feedback, please feel free to use both of those. Just to get started, Natasha, I'll read out some of the questions that we have already. The first one that we have is just about the working space in Madrid. So where is it located?
Yeah, it's in Plaza Jacinto Benavente.
Okay.
If they've made a note of that, I'll give you the actual.
I think you'll be able to, if you would like to put in the chat function, Natasha.
Yeah, I'll actually have a look at that now for you, and I'll actually put it in there. So just bear with me a second. I'll put that in there now for you, and then everybody else can see that as well, can't they? So that it's
Yeah.
Okay.
Chat function.
There you go. Everybody should have that location there.
And then another question that we got through is, could you please clarify the change in tax from 25% to 4% for branch/permanent establishments? Which conditions are linked to this tax change?
Could you cover whether sorry, what was that again?
It's the first question, so it's.
Oh, right, yeah, I can see. Could you cover the change in tax from 25% to 4% for branch permanent establishments? Which conditions are linked to this change? Okay, right. Well, that change is based on your location. The 4% corporation tax is only applicable in the Canary Islands, which makes Canary Islands the most favourable place to locate for corporation tax. It's the lowest in Europe. And in order to comply with that, on one of my slides, which I think will be shared with you by the Spanish Chamber, anybody that's present today, I have no problem with you sharing those slides with them, Rebecca. You'll see what the requirements are to be able to benefit from the 4%.
Great.
Yeah, which was the investment, it was the minimum investment of 100,000 euros in Gran Canaria and Tenerife, 50,000 on the other islands, and then you would have the obligation to have minimum staff of 5 in Gran Canaria and Tenerife, and minimum staff of 3. Those staff need to be on your payroll within the first 6 months of having received the resolution from the SET consortium. The process there would be the following. We would prepare the business plan for you. We would assess it before we move forward with presenting it to the SEC. We collaborate really closely with them. So we know what would be acceptable and what wouldn't be acceptable. And we would make sure that when it's presented, that there's you would be receiving that. We wouldn't waste anybody's time, you know. But the solvency situation is important. You would need to make sure that you do have those funds, or you're able to guarantee those funds of investment within the first 2 years of that activity. But you would need to make sure that you've got guarantee of that when we submit the report.
Okay, fantastic. Another question that we got through is, could you cover whether there are any different requirements for non-profit companies, i.e. community interest company, as feedback? This was a very helpful and informative session. So
could you cover whether there are any requirements for non-profit companies? The requirement, okay, non-profit companies would normally establish themselves in Spain as a non-lucrative entity. So there would be corporate statutes that would be drawn together for them to be recognised. There would be a board of representatives with the president, similar to the UK, president, vice president, secretary, treasury, several vocals that can be part of the board, and there would be an administrative situation that they would need to comply with. There would be an assembly that would need to make sure that everybody's informed. They'd have to have an identification number in Spain as well. If you're talking about one that's already existing, then normally they would set up a filial or a branch in Spain where it would be recognised and it would be registered with the depending on what activity it's carried out. For example, there's a registration of associations, there's a registry for associations, a registry charities. So it would depend on what activity, non-lucrative activity they're going to be carrying out to determine which registry they would need to be registered in. I'm not sure. I hope I've answered that question clearly enough.
Great. Yeah, I think so, Natasha.
Yeah.
I don't know if you addressed the second question about do you recommend any payroll companies to help with employing staff in Spain?
Okay.
What's the cost for a TA if done with a lawyer?
Okay. Well, payroll companies, EBF Consulting has a payroll department, so EBF would do that, and there's lots of other companies that are available. We do payroll for companies throughout Spain. We're a digital company, so we have a digital platform that we would provide clients with regards to employing staff. The average cost for a TIE, we have a company that would be able to deal with that. They deal with all over Spain, so we will be able to introduce them to that company for anybody that wants the TIE. The TIE we would be able to assist with for those people that wanted to carry out the SEC, and also in Madrid. There's if you're going to be a company that's going to be carrying out one of the programs, for example, the Invest in Madrid and also the Canary Island Hub, then there's support from because you're going to be presenting a business plan and you'll be taking part in one of those programs. There's going to be support with regards to applying for the TAs for the administrators and the shareholders, so that that would be quite speedy, and also for employees of that company that's been accepted as part of those programs. That's one of the advantages that you have if you do go for one of those investment programs.
Great, and then we do have one more question. In what format does the €50,000 investment in other islands need to be a ZEC entity? Can you open a business and invest 50,000 in an office space and be deemed a ZEC?
Can you open a business and invest 50,000 in an office space and deemed ZEC? Office space. If you've purchased premises, if your intention, part of the plan would be the following: you can either purchase, say you're going to purchase the office premises, so that will be the 50,000. Well, obviously it'd be more. That would comply. But to say that you're only going to be renting office space, then no, because that's not a capital investment. That's a cost to the company, and that would go in your P&L and it wouldn't go on your balance sheet. So when we're looking at that, there's only one of those really. For example, when I mentioned before, you're able to invest in the staff. Okay, so staffing costs. So if you've already reached your minimum 3, sorry, that's with the RIC, that is with the staffing costs. Forget what I'm talking about then. If you're gonna, so in answer to that question, if you're going to purchase a property, then yes, that will be going down on your balance sheet, and that will be considered as an investment. Okay.
That's everything that we have for today, Natasha. But just to reiterate, I will be sharing Natasha's contact details in a follow-up email.
Yeah.
So if there are any other questions that you have, or if you'd like to discuss anything further with Natasha, please do feel free to contact her directly, or at a later date, if you want to contact Natasha through the chamber too, please feel free to do so. Thank you for all of those questions, and thank you to you, Natasha, for collaborating with us again. It's always a pleasure to work with you. So So thank you.
Thank you. No, thank you everybody that's assisted, and I hope it's been useful. I got a slight concern because I thought it was 11 o'clock. I got mixed up with my times between the mainland and the UK. So I hope it was informative. And if there are any questions that need more answers, especially the Perna Kamlani, sorry, if you need a more specific answer to that question, then please don't hesitate to contact me. And thank you for organising everything once again. Thanks to everybody.
That's okay. Thank you, Natasha. And in the meantime, hope you all have a great day and very Merry Christmas from the Chamber as well. Enjoy the festivities, and hopefully we'll see many of you soon in the new year. Our events calendar is quickly filling up, so please do feel free to check that out, and we'll be in touch very soon. Thanks again. Thanks, Natasha.
Thanks. Bye-bye.